The twin suns of the alien city burned bright above the desert sky. Heat rose from the ground in soft waves, twisting the air and making the towers look like they were made of smoke. The city was alive with strange voices and strange smells. It was a place where anything could be bought or sold. Machines, weapons, secrets, and sometimes, people. At the heart of the city stood the Market of Broken Dreams. The name was not written anywhere, but everyone knew it. Here, cages lined. The streets, each holding those who had nothing left. Broken slaves, prisoners, lost refugees. Traders shouted, bargaining with buyers who wanted something cheap, something useful, something strong. And among them sat her. She was small compared to the others, her thin body covered in a torn cloth. One of her legs was missing from the knee, down, replaced with a crude stick tied with wire. Her skin was pale silver, her hair long and dark like a shadow, her eyes glowing faint blue with sadness. She did not shout for buyers like the others. She only sat silently on the stone floor, with a sign made of wood placed in front of her. It read, "For sale. Enough for one prosthetic leg." The crowd laughed whenever they passed her. Some whispered cruel jokes. Others shook their heads. Who would buy a broken alien girl who could not even walk? She had nothing to give, she was useless. Hours passed. The suns moved higher. No one stopped. No one cared, until he came. A tall figure walked slowly through the market. His clothes were strange, simple, rough, patched together like he had traveled far. His skin was human, his hair dark, his eyes sharp and searching. A human soldier, though most of the crowd did not know what that meant. He walked with calm steps, scanning the cages and stalls as if looking for something only he could see. When his eyes fell on the girl, he stopped. She looked up at him, afraid at first. Every time a buyer stopped before her, it was only to mock or spit. But this man did not laugh. He simply stood there, silent, watching her with a gaze that was neither cruel nor kind, only curious. The trader near her cage smirked. "You do not want her, stranger," the alien trader hissed. "She is broken, she cannot work. Worthless." The man did not reply. He stepped closer, crouched down, and looked directly into the girl's glowing eyes. For the first time, she felt seen. Not as broken flesh, not as useless weight, but as something alive. "Why?" the man asked, his voice quiet but steady. "Why put yourself for sale?" Her throat was dry, but she forced out words. "For a leg," she whispered. "A prosthetic. Enough to walk again." The crowd around them chuckled. A fool's dream, they thought. No one wastes money on the broken. The man straightened, pulled a small pouch from his side and dropped it on the trader's table. The sound of heavy coins filled the air. "I will take her," he said. The marketplace froze. Traders blinked, buyers whispered in shock. "He bought her?" one muttered. "For what?" another scoffed. "She is useless," a third spat. The alien trader grinned wide and pushed the girl forward with rough hands. "She is yours, human. But do not come back asking for refunds." The girl stumbled, nearly falling, until the man caught her arm, gently. For the first time in so long, someone touched her without cruelty. He helped her stand, though her one leg trembled with weakness. As they walked away, voices followed them. "Crazy human. Throwing money away. She will die soon anyway." But the man did not look back. He led her through the twisting alleys of the city, past glowing signs and alien smells, until the noise of the market grew faint. They reached a quiet shelter built from scrap metal and stone. Inside there was water, simple food, and a small bed. The girl sat silently, unsure. Her heart pounded. Who was this man? Why had he taken her? Would he sell her again? Use her? Hurt her? The human placed food before her. Bread, dried meat, and water. He said nothing, only nodded for her to eat. She ate slowly, her hands shaking. The taste filled her empty stomach like fire. She had not eaten properly in days. Tears burned her eyes, though she tried to hide them. Finally, she asked, her voice soft. Why did you buy me? The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke with a calm voice. Because no one else did. The words struck her harder than any chain ever had. He did not speak again. He moved to his corner, sitting down with his weapon beside him as if keeping guard. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions and fear. The night fell. The city outside roared with its endless noise. But inside the shelter, there was only silence. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark inside her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close. The sun had just risen when Sierra opened her eyes inside the small shelter. At first, she thought it was another cruel dream. But then, she saw the fire burning in the corner and the simple bed beneath her. For a moment, she could not believe she was free from the noise and laughter of the market. Then she noticed the man sitting nearby. Daniel. The human who had bought her when no one else wanted her. He sat quietly, cleaning his weapon with steady hands, his face calm and unreadable. When he noticed she was awake, he said only 3 words. You are safe. His voice was not harsh like the traders. It was not mocking like the buyers. It was firm, as if he was giving her a promise. She did not know why. But his words carried weight. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. She sat up slowly, her weak body trembling, her single leg pressing against the cold floor. Her eyes searched his face. At last, she whispered the question that burned in her chest. Why me? Why did you choose me when everyone laughed? Daniel paused and looked at her with eyes that seemed to see deeper than her broken body. He stood and stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. Because I know what it means to be left behind, he said. His words were quiet but heavy, like stones dropped into water. She felt them sink into her heart. He handed her food wrapped in cloth, bread, dried meat, and a flask of water. Her hands shook as she reached for it, afraid he would pull it back like others used to. But he did not. She ate slowly, tasting real food after many days, and tears pricked her eyes. He pretended not to notice, simply returning to his seat in silence. Later he told her his name. Call me Daniel, he said, and she repeated it softly as if testing the sound. Then she gave her own name, Sierra, waiting to see if he would laugh at it as others had. But he only nodded, his expression unchanged. For some reason, his quiet acceptance meant more than any kindness she had known. As the day went on, Daniel walked with her through narrow alleys away from the main market. He had made a crutch from scrap wood and rope, and though her steps were weak and clumsy, he never rushed her. The people in the streets stared at them, whispering about the human soldier and the broken alien girl. Some laughed openly, calling Daniel a fool, but he walked forward without a word, and she found herself trying to walk a little straighter even as she stumbled. They visited a small workshop filled with rusted machines and broken parts. Daniel traded some of his supplies for pieces of old prosthetic limbs, metal joints, and wires. Sierra's heart skipped when she realized what he intended. Could he really make her walk again? She had dreamed of it, but never believed it possible. Back. In the shelter, Daniel set the pieces on the table and began working with calm, careful hands. Sierra sat close, her eyes wide, watching him shape metal and connect wires. She wanted to ask why he was doing this for her, why he wasted time and effort on someone like her. But the question died in her throat. When she finally found courage to speak, her voice was barely a whisper. I cannot fight. I cannot give you anything. Why help me? Daniel looked up and held her gaze. His reply was simple. You are alive. That is enough. The word struck her harder than any insult ever had. No one had ever told her that her life alone had value. She turned her face away, ashamed of the tears in her eyes, but deep inside something began to change. That night, as the fire cracked in the corner, Daniel finally shared part of his past. He told her about a battle where he had been abandoned by his own men. They believed he was dead, left him behind with broken bones and no weapon. But he survived alone, crawling through mud, drinking rainwater, fighting until he returned. When he came back, no one wanted him anymore. To them, he was broken, just as she was now. Syrah listened with her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt she was not alone in her pain. She told him her own story, how she had lost her leg in a war and how her people had abandoned her too. Her voice shook as she spoke, and when she finished, she lowered her head in shame. But Daniel's voice was steady when he answered. They were wrong. You are not useless. You are still here. That means you are strong. The firelight glowed in his eyes as he spoke, and Syrah believed him. Days passed, and Daniel continued shaping the rough prosthetic limb. It was not perfect, but each piece gave her hope. Each night she practiced walking with the crutch, falling and rising again. Her body was weak, but his calm patience gave her strength to keep trying. One evening, as the suns dipped low, Daniel noticed shadows moving at the edge of the alley. Traitors, the same ones who had mocked her in the market. Their eyes glowed with greed as they whispered among themselves. One of them hissed, "She was ours, we want her back." Fear gripped Syrah's chest, but Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between her and the traitors. His hand rested on his weapon, his face calm but sharp. "She is not yours anymore," he said. The traitors glared, but backed away for the moment, spitting curses into the dust. When they were gone, Syrah looked at Daniel with wide, trembling eyes. "You would fight for me," she whispered. He glanced at her, his face unreadable, but his words burned into her heart. "I already chose you." That night, as she lay awake listening to the quiet fire, those words echoed in her mind again and again. For the first time, she began to wonder if she was not a burden after all. Perhaps she was someone worth saving. Perhaps she was someone worth choosing. The days that followed were unlike anything Syrah had ever known. For the first time in her life, time did not crawl inside a cage. Time moved with purpose. Daniel worked on the pieces of the prosthetic leg, shaping metal, tightening wires, testing small joints with patience that seemed endless. His hands were rough, scarred from battles she could only imagine, yet they moved with surprising care. She watched him every day, her heart filling with questions she dared not ask. At first, she felt like a shadow in his shelter. She sat quietly, afraid to make noise, afraid to break whatever fragile bond had kept him from leaving her behind. But Daniel never asked her to leave, never raised his voice, never looked at her with disgust the way others had. Instead, he gave her tasks, small things at first. Hold the tools, bring water, stir the fire. At first she fumbled, her single leg making even simple things difficult. She braced herself for his anger, but it never came. Daniel only nodded, showing her again with calm patience. Slowly, she began to believe she could be useful. Slowly, she began to feel alive. At night, when the fire burned low and the world outside was filled with noise and danger, they spoke. Daniel's words were always few, but when he chose them, they mattered. He told her more of his past, how his squad had left him broken in a ruined battlefield, how he had clawed through dirt and darkness to survive, how he had returned to his people only to see rejection in their eyes. They saw him as weak, no longer a soldier, no longer one of them. Syrah listened with her glowing eyes fixed on him, every word pulling her closer to him. In his story, she saw her own. She told him how her family had turned away from her after she lost her leg, how she had begged for a chance to stay, but her people said the broken had no place in their future. Her voice trembled, but Daniel did not look away. When she finished, his reply was simple yet powerful. "Then their future is blind." Those words cut deep into her soul. For so long she had believed their judgment. For so long she had believed she was worthless. Now this man, this human, told her their cruelty was blindness. For the first time she allowed herself to believe he might be right. Daniel kept working on the leg, and one morning he handed it to her. The rough metal frame was heavy, the joints stiff, but it was shaped with care. Her hands trembled as she touched it. "For me," she whispered, as if it was too much to believe. He nodded. "For you." It took days before she could stand on it. She fell many times, bruising her arms, scraping her hands on the rough floor. Each time shame burned her heart. She waited for Daniel to sigh, to curse, to turn away. But he never did. He simply helped her up and told her, again. His voice was steady, never mocking, never soft with pity, just firm, just steady. Slowly, her steps grew stronger. One evening, after many attempts, she walked 3 steps without falling. Just 3 steps. But to her, it felt like flying. She turned to him, her chest heaving, tears in her eyes. For the first time in years, she smiled. Daniel did not smile back, but his eyes softened. That was enough. The bond between them grew in silence and shared meals in the moments where no words were needed. Sierra began to sense that Daniel too was healing through her. She noticed the way his eyes softened when she laughed softly at her own clumsy steps. She noticed how his shoulders relaxed in the quiet nights when she was near the fire. He was a man who carried a heavy weight, but with her it seemed to lift, even if only a little. But peace does not last long in a place built on cruelty. One night, as the fire flickered low, Sierra heard voices outside. She froze, her body stiff with fear. Daniel motioned for her to stay still, his hand already on his weapon. The door creaked as shadows passed by, whispering in the alien tongue. She caught only pieces of their words, her name, the market, the price. The traders had not forgotten. They wanted her back. Her chest tightened with panic. She remembered their cold eyes, their cruel laughter. She whispered, trembling, "They will take me. They will take me again." Daniel stood by the door, his weapon ready, his body still as stone. "They will not," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a finality that sent shivers through her. The footsteps faded into the night, but the fear stayed. Sierra looked at him, her voice breaking. "Why risk yourself for me? I am nothing." He turned to her, his face hard but his eyes steady. "You are not nothing. You are mine to protect. I chose you." The words burned into her chest like fire. She had been thrown away by everyone else, left to rot in the market. But here was a man who claimed her, not as property, not as burden, but as someone worth standing for. She lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with feelings she did not yet understand. The next day she walked farther than before, her new leg clanking against the stone floor, her body trembling but her spirit burning. Daniel watched in silence, but in his eyes she saw something she had never seen before. Respect. The world outside was still cruel. The traders were still waiting. Danger was still coming. But inside that small shelter, in the bond between 2 outcasts, something stronger than fear was being born. The city never truly slept. Even in the darkest hours, the streets echoed with the sound of machines and traders whispering in shadowed alleys. Sierra had learned to live with the noise, but inside the small shelter she felt safe. The fire glowed softly. The rough walls kept out the world, and Daniel's calm presence gave her strength. Every day she grew stronger on the prosthetic leg he had built. Every night she took more steps without falling. For the first time since her accident, she felt her body was her own again. But safety is a fragile thing, and in cruel places, safety never lasts. It began with the eyes. Daniel noticed them first. Strange figures lingering near the alleys, watching the shelter from a distance, pretending to pass by but always returning. The traders from the market. Their greed had not ended the day Daniel bought Sierra. They wanted her back. Not because she was useful, not because she was strong, but because she was a prize they had lost. To them, losing her meant losing power. And men who live on cruelty never accept loss. Sierra sensed it too. She felt it in the way shadows followed them when Daniel took her out to practice walking. She heard it in the quiet footsteps that stopped when she turned her head. At night she dreamed of chains and cages, of cold hands dragging her back into the market. She woke trembling, her breath shallow, and always Daniel was there, sitting with his weapon ready, as if he never truly slept. One evening, the storm finally broke. They were eating in silence, the firelight flickering against the walls, when a loud crash shook the door. Sierra gasped and dropped the cup in her hand. Daniel was already standing, his weapon drawn, his body tense. Another crash came, and the wooden door split under the force of boots. Shadows poured in. 3 traders, their eyes glowing with greed, their hands armed with blades and rusted rifles. "There she is," one snarled. "The broken girl. You thought you could steal from us, human? She belongs to the market." Sierra's heart froze. Her body shook so hard she could barely stand. The memories came rushing back, the jeers, the laughter, the endless rejection. She wanted to hide, to vanish, but Daniel's voice cut through the terror. "She belongs to no one," he said, his tone sharp as steel. The traders laughed, but their laughter was nervous. Daniel did not move like prey. He moved like a predator who had chosen his ground. With calm steps, he pushed Sierra behind him, his weapon raised. "You have one chance," he warned. "Leave now." But men of greed never walk away. The first trader lunged with a blade, screaming. Daniel moved like a storm. His weapon cracked through the air, striking the man across the jaw. He fell with a cry, blood spilling into the dust. The second raised his rifle, but before he could fire, Daniel was on him, twisting the barrel aside and slamming a fist into his throat. The man staggered back, choking. The third trader charged toward Sierra, his eyes wild, his blade ready to cut her down. Fear locked her body. But in that moment, something stronger than fear pushed her forward. She grabbed the nearest thing she could reach, a broken metal rod from the floor, and swung it with all her strength. The strike hit the trader's arm, making him stumble. He roared in anger and raised his blade again, but Daniel was already there, pulling him away, his strike quick and brutal. The man collapsed with a groan, the blade clattering from his hand. The shelter was filled with the smell of smoke and blood. Sierra stood frozen, the metal rod still in her shaking hands. Her chest heaved, her glowing eyes wide with shock. She had fought back. Even if only for a moment, she had struck against the ones who had called her worthless. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, scanning the room. 2 traders lay groaning on the ground, the third unconscious, their greed beaten out of them but not gone. He dragged them to the door and threw them into the alley like broken trash. Then he turned back to Sierra. She was trembling, her body weak, but her eyes burned with something new. Not just fear, not just survival, a fire. I hit him," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I thought I could not, but I did." Daniel's gaze softened, just slightly. "You did," he said. "And you will again if you must." Her breath caught, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name. For years she had believed she was nothing more than a broken shell. But tonight, she had stood her ground. Not alone, never alone, but she had not fallen. The city outside was still full of noise, but inside the shelter the silence was heavier than ever. Sierra sat by the fire, her body trembling, and Daniel stood by the door, watching the dark streets, his weapon in hand. She realized then that his promise was not just words. He would fight for her. He would stand between her and the darkness. But the thought that terrified her most was not the traders or the city. It was what he had awakened inside her. She was no longer only surviving. She was beginning to want more, and the world beyond the shelter would not forgive that. The shelter still smelled of blood and smoke. Sierra sat close to the fire, her body trembling from the fight that had almost dragged her back into darkness. The traders had come, and for the first time, she had not only survived, but had raised her hand against them. She stared at her own, fingers now shaking but alive, still feeling the weight of the metal rod she had used. Daniel stood at the broken door, silent, his weapon in hand, his eyes watching the street with calm that seemed carved from stone. The night stretched on. The city outside carried on with its noise, uncaring of what had happened in one broken shelter. But inside, something had changed forever. Sira was no longer the girl who had sat in the market, waiting for pity, waiting for someone to buy her, as if she were nothing. She was something else now, and Daniel had seen it too. When the sun rose, they left the shelter. The broken door was proof enough that it was no longer safe. Daniel guided her through the alleys, his steps steady, his eyes always searching. Sira followed, limping on the rough prosthetic he had built. It was heavy and clumsy, but it was hers, and each step was proof that she was no longer crawling through life. They reached the edge of the city, where the towers gave way to broken lands of stone and sand. Here the noise faded, and the air was sharp and dry. Daniel stopped and looked. At the horizon, where the twin suns burned red against the sky, Sira stood beside him, breathing hard, the weight of her new leg pressing against her body, but her eyes shining with a light she had thought she had lost forever. "Why here?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her, his face unreadable but his voice calm. "Because here, we begin again." He built another shelter, this time away from the greedy eyes of traders and the endless noise of the city. It was simple: stone walls, a roof of scrap metal, a fire pit. But it was theirs. Together they carried wood, fetched water from a cracked pipe in the rocks, and shaped a place where silence meant peace, not fear. For the first time, Sira worked beside someone who did not see her as broken. Each time she stumbled, Daniel offered his hand. Each time she fell, he helped her rise. And slowly the distance between them became smaller, not only in space but in trust. Days turned into weeks. Sira grew stronger, her steps steadier, her body less fragile. She could walk farther, each day, practice with the crude leg Daniel had built, and sometimes even laugh when she stumbled in the sand. Daniel never laughed at her, but sometimes she caught his eyes softening, and it made her heart burn with something she could not name. One night, under the stars, Daniel brought her something new, a small box of wires and tools he had scavenged from the ruins. Inside was another piece of technology, smoother, stronger than the first prosthetic. He sat by the fire, working with quiet patience, his scarred hands shaping something better for her. When he was finished, he placed it before her. "Try this," he said. Her hands trembled as she touched it. The new leg was lighter, stronger, built with care beyond anything she had imagined. With Daniel's help, she fixed it in place. She stood slowly, expecting the weight to pull her down, but instead she found balance. The joint moved smoothly, the steps came easier, and when she took her first stride across the sand without falling, tears filled her eyes. She turned to him, her voice breaking. "I can walk?" Daniel nodded. "You can." She laughed then, a sound she had not made in years, a sound that startled even her. The night air carried it far into the empty land, a sound of life where there had only been silence. Daniel did not laugh with her, but she saw the corner of his mouth soften, and that was enough. The days after were different. Sira no longer walked only to survive. She walked to explore, to see the world beyond the city, to prove to herself that she was alive. She climbed small rocks, chased the wind across the sand, and stood tall under the suns with her hair flowing, like dark fire. And every time she looked back, Daniel was there, watching, steady as ever, the silent shadow that had chosen her. But danger had not vanished. The traitors had been humiliated, and men of greed never forget. Rumors drifted into the desert, whispers of groups searching, of markets angry that a human had defied them. Daniel prepared for it. He trained with his weapon each night, checked the horizon each morning, always ready. Sira noticed, and one evening she asked, "They will come again, won't they?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes dark but calm. "Yes, but now they will not face a broken girl. They will face us." The words struck her heart like thunder. For so long she had been alone. Now she was not just protected, she was part of something greater. She was no longer worthless. She was chosen. The night before the next storm, She sat by the fire and looked at Daniel. Her voice was soft, almost afraid. Why me? Out of everyone, in that market, why did you choose me? Daniel did not answer at once. He stared at the flames, the scars on his hands glowing red in the light. Finally, he looked at her, his voice low and steady. Because you were like me, broken, alone, and because I knew you would not stay broken forever. Her breath caught, and tears blurred her vision. She wanted to speak, to tell him how his choice had changed her life, but the words would not come. Instead, she stood, stepped toward him on her new leg, and sat close beside him by the fire. For the first time, she did not feel like a shadow. She felt like a flame. When morning came, the horizon was no longer a prison. It was a promise. The galaxy still saw them as weak, as outcasts, as broken things that could be bought and sold. But Syrah knew now that the galaxy was wrong. With Daniel beside her, she was more than the broken girl of the market. She was alive. She was strong. She was dangerous in ways no one had yet understood. And as the suns rose over the desert, she walked into the new day, no longer waiting to be chosen, but ready to choose her own future.